Ready, explore! JustProfessor here. You tell yourself you are amazing, and suddenly criticism does not matter anymore. Every time someone points out a mistake, you remind yourself of something good about yourself. Every time you face uncomfortable feedback, you shift your focus to your strengths. Every time reality challenges your self-image, you protect yourself by thinking about all the things you do well. And it works. You feel better. You feel secure. But here's the problem. You just made yourself blind to the truth. And that blindness is costing you more than you realize. This is called self-affirmation bias. And it is keeping you stuck while making you believe you are fine. Here's how it works. When you receive information that threatens your sense of self, your brain activates a defense system. Instead of processing that information, it redirects your attention to something that makes you feel good about yourself. You remind yourself of your values, your achievements, your identity, and that reminder creates a shield. Suddenly, the threatening information feels less important, less urgent, less true, so you ignore it. This is why self-affirmation bias is so dangerous. It does not make you stronger. It makes you fragile, because you are not building confidence. You are building walls. And those walls keep out the very information you need to grow. Most people think self-affirmation is healthy. They think reminding yourself of your worth is a good thing. And sometimes it is. But when you use it to avoid facing uncomfortable truths, it stops being helpful. It becomes a defense mechanism. A way to protect your ego instead of improving yourself. Think about what happens when someone criticizes your work. Your first instinct is to feel attacked. So your brain immediately jumps to something that makes you feel better. You think about past successes, about how hard you worked, about how much you know, and suddenly the criticism feels less valid. You convince yourself that the person just does not understand, that they are being too harsh, that you are actually doing fine. So you do not change anything. You just protect your self-image and move on, but here is what you miss. That criticism might have been accurate. It might have pointed out a real problem, a real gap, a real opportunity to improve. But you never considered it seriously because you were too busy reminding yourself that you are good enough already. This is what self-affirmation bias does. It makes you choose comfort over growth. It makes you prioritize feeling good over being better. And the worst part is that it feels like self-care. It feels like you are protecting your mental health. But you are not. You are protecting your ego. And there is a difference. The scary part is how automatic this becomes. You get feedback that makes you uncomfortable. Before you even process it, your brain starts listing your positive qualities. You are smart. You are hardworking. You are experienced. And those thoughts feel true. They are true. But they are also irrelevant to the feedback. The feedback is not about whether you are a good person. It is about whether you made a specific mistake. But your brain does not care. It just wants to neutralize the threat. So it shifts focus. And you never actually deal with the real issue. You face a failure. Something did not work out. And instead of analyzing what went wrong, you remind yourself of all the things that did work. You tell yourself that one failure does not define you. That you have succeeded before. That you will succeed again. And all of that is true. But it also prevents you from learning. Because you never sit with the failure long enough to understand it. You just comfort yourself and move forward without changing anything. You receive data that challenges your beliefs. Maybe about your health, maybe about your relationships, maybe about your career. And instead of reconsidering those beliefs, you remind yourself why you hold them. You think about your values, your experiences, your reasoning. And that reminder makes the new data feel less important, so you dismiss it. Not because it is wrong, but because accepting it would require you to question yourself. And self-affirmation bias does not allow that. This is the trap. Self-affirmation feels like strength. It feels like you are being confident, like you are standing up for yourself. But real strength is not about defending your self-image. It is about being secure enough to question it. And self-affirmation bias makes that impossible. Now think about how this plays out over time. You avoid difficult conversations because they might challenge how you see yourself. You surround yourself with people who validate you instead of people who push you. You dismiss advice that does not align with your current identity. You ignore warning signs because acknowledging them would mean admitting you are not as in control as you think. And slowly, you create a version of yourself that is comfortable but stagnant. A version that feels good but does not grow. And the most dangerous part is that you do not see this happening. Because every time you use self-affirmation to avoid discomfort, it feels justified. It feels like you are protecting yourself from negativity, from unfair criticism, from people who do not understand you. But most of the time, you are just protecting yourself from reality. Self-affirmation bias does not just affect how you see yourself, it affects how you see feedback, how you see failure, how you see growth. When you constantly redirect to your strengths to avoid facing your weaknesses, you stop improving. You stop learning, you stop adapting, and eventually you stop moving forward. You just stay in place, feeling good about who you are while the world moves on without you. This means self-affirmation bias is not about self-love, it is about self-protection. And there is a cost. Every time you use your strengths to dismiss your weaknesses, you lose an opportunity to improve. Every time you remind yourself you are good enough to avoid uncomfortable feedback, you guarantee you will stay exactly where you are. Every time you choose feeling secure over being accurate, you trade growth for comfort. And the irony is that this makes you less secure in the long run. Because deep down, you know you are avoiding something. You know there are truths you are not facing. You know there are gaps you are not addressing. And that knowledge sits beneath the surface, quietly eating away at your confidence, making you more defensive, more sensitive, more afraid of being exposed. Real confidence does not need constant affirmation. It can sit with criticism and consider it. It can face failure and learn from it. It can hear uncomfortable truths and adapt. But self-affirmation bias prevents all of that. It makes you brittle, defensive, stuck. So here's what you need to understand. Self-affirmation is not the problem. The problem is using it as a shield. When you remind yourself of your worth to avoid dealing with reality, you are not being kind to yourself. You are being dishonest. And that dishonesty keeps you from becoming who you could be. You do not need to tear yourself down. You do not need to accept every criticism as truth. But you do need to be willing to sit with discomfort, to consider feedback even when it stings, to face your mistakes without immediately redirecting to your successes. Because growth only happens when you stop protecting your self-image and start examining it. Self-affirmation bias tells you that defending yourself is strength. But real strength is not needing to defend yourself at all. It is being secure enough to question yourself, to change yourself, to admit when you are wrong, and to do all of that without your sense of worth falling apart. You are not your achievements. You are not your strengths. You are not your identity. You are a person who can grow. But only if you stop using affirmation as armor and start using it as foundation. A foundation that lets you face hard truths without crumbling. A foundation that supports growth instead of preventing it. Subscribe if you want to see the mental traps that keep you from changing.